Death. The thing we fear most. But my only fear was what would happen if I remained alive. So I ran. I knew my father would try to stop me, and I knew others would come for me. Others whose only desire was money. But my longing was stronger. I wanted salvation. Of all the sensations, pain is the purest, without ambiguity. You feel it or you don't. I had never experienced pain. But now I knew that I could visit it on others. A pain so strong, so intense, that it would purify the world. I had learned the truth, so I ran. The noise of the funeral didn't mask my assassin's approach. I hoped for a quick death, hoped it would be possible. So I stopped running. I had never experienced pain, and I so wanted to feel it now. I wasn't disappointed.
Another week and another episode of the 8-Bit Academic, a humble YouTube channel that I created a few months ago at the bequest of some friends to help me deal with my ever so obsessive nature of going down one too many rabbit holes whenever I find a bunch of new topics that catch my interest. Coupled with this obsessive need to know more is also my love for retro video games, which often include, as most of you could tell by now, some obscure gems from the 1990s and early 2000s.
And this is my beach ball collection. And what you can do here is, I've got about 500 beach balls in here, and this is one of my favorites. I keep it near the door. Pretty typical one. This is called the RB150 model, which was just recently discontinued. In fact, I don't know why. It was a pretty good beach ball. This is about as fine a workmanship as you can see. This is what is a good seam here. See how flat it lays here?
So, as per my already established tradition on this channel, I'm going to start off with taking you back in time to the year 2000 to take a look at one of the first video games to feature cel-shaded graphics called Fear Effect, which was developed by Kronos Digital Entertainment and published by Eidos Interactive for the Sony PlayStation 1 console. Fear Effect would also get a pre-sequel in the year 2001 called Fear Effect Retro Helix, which mostly details events that took place before the first game. There was meant to be a third installment in the series for the PlayStation 2, but unfortunately it got cancelled. The Fear Effect games are also well known for their awesome content.
And then work that into meat. Give your meat a good old rub. Hot and spicy meat. Yeah, boy.
Yeah, when it comes to being a blatant example of sex sells, Fear Effect is definitely one of those games, and is probably one of the top examples that hardline feminists point to when criticizing female portrayals in video games. But I assure you that Fear Effect is definitely more substance than its overall, themes would imply.
Listen! You are the people in history they warned us about! They warned us about people like you! Pay attention!
The story also features one of the first ever LGBTQ characters in a video game, as it is explicitly made known that Hannah is a lesbian and is only interested in other female characters. Together with her band of guns for hire, which include Royce Glass and Jacob Deek de Court, Hannah must navigate the seedy rooftops and back alleys of a futuristic Hong Kong in the year 2050 to find the missing daughter of a powerful triad boss named Mr. Lam. Their real goal being instead to kidnap the girl whose name is Wei Ming Lam and hold her for ransom. What starts out as a straightforward snatch and grab quickly takes a few horrifying turns, as it is revealed that Mr. Lam has made a pact with a Chinese demon lord. The trio's journey then takes them from the towering Hong Kong dystopia right into the bowels of the Chinese underworld, where they must face off against a series of supernatural horrors. Fear Effect, as mentioned earlier, features gameplay with unshaded characters textured to resemble 2D cell shading, notably being one of the first games to attempt this now extremely overused technique. Rather than using pre-rendered 2D backgrounds, the environments are composed of streaming or looping 3D full motion videos. As a consequence of this though, the game is composed of 4 discs. Ah yes, remember the days when a game was too big to fit on one disc, and thus you needed like 7 of them to even play the game. There are also puzzles interspersed between action sequences similar to other games of the survival horror genre, and let me tell you that these puzzles are both extremely confusing and really f***ing hard.
You owe me!
Not after this, I don't. Damn it!
What? What is it, Hannah?
The timer, it just started.
How much? How much is it saying?
Not a lot. Now shut up, Jin. I gotta think.
Okay.
It's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
And not to mention the highly frustrating Resident Evil style tank controls. But all in all, both Fear Effect 1 and 2 are really great games, if not at least for their atmosphere and story. As far as I know, there was meant to be a remake released back in 2018, which only seems to have gotten as far as a teaser trailer and was most likely cancelled. But I do know there exists a tactical isometric sequel called Fear Effect Sedna, which was released for the PS4 and Xbox One back in 2018 as well. If you're a fan of retro games and especially those of the survival horror genre from back in the day, do give Fear Effect 1 and 2 a go, since it plays pretty well on current PSX emulators. But anyway, with all that retro gaming sexiness out of the way, let's move on to today's topic, the crazy conspiracies surrounding the Animal Virology Lab at Plum Island, New York. Think of this as a bit of a sequel to the episode that I did on the Montauk project, linked down below and at the end of the video. This one was actually suggested by an audience member. Thank you to said audience member whose name I won't state because I value people's privacy, as well as my own, for the suggestion for this week's episode. So to get started, what or where exactly is Plum Island? And before you ask, no, it is not an island which contains an abundance of plum fruit. And yes, I know that joke is cheesy as fuck, but here we are. You may proceed to sit there and die of cringe for my absolutely lame attempts at achieving comedy.
How come you suck?
I lack confidence.
Plum Island, as its name suggests, is an island off the eastern coast of the United States of America, specifically in Suffolk County, New York State, and is the exact location of the Plum Island Animal Disease Center, which was established in the year 1954 by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, to study foot and mouth disease in farm cattle as well as other animal-related diseases. This was mostly in response to multiple outbreaks among farm animals in the US, Canada and Mexico at the time. In the 1990s, Plum Island came under scrutiny after being accused of housing illegal and hazardous chemicals by the US Department of Agriculture and was issued a $111,000 fine. In 2000, there was also an attempt by the facility to expand its operations to include the study of human diseases. However, this was prevented by activists and local government entities of Long Island, New York. In 2002, it was transferred from the US Department of Agriculture to the Department of Homeland Security, which one has to ask the question of what exactly Homeland Security has to do with animal-related diseases.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
As recently as 2023, there were attempts at putting the island up for auction by the Department of Homeland Security, but this was blocked by US Congress due to the fact that the island itself is home to a variety of endangered species of both wildlife and plant life. However, it has to be noted that since 2005, there is currently a plan underway to move the research facility from Plum Island to Kansas State on the US mainland to a new facility called the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility. However, this has sparked some concerns as the initial isolation of the Plum Island Animal Disease Center made it easier to handle potential lab leaks due to the fact that, well, it was on an island in the ocean. But according to repeated risk assessments done at the new site in Kansas State by the Department of Homeland Security, since 2012, they have reported that the new location is quite safe and secure. Sounds a lot like the same song they sang about that lab in Wuhan back in 2020, around the time of the China virus. COVID-19 outbreak. However, despite the honest work in animal diseases being done at the Plum Island Research Facility, the site has been the subject of multiple conspiracy theories that range from the manufacture of biological weapons, human-animal hybrids, germ warfare, and secret human experimentation, and is sometimes even connected to the Montauk Project by conspiracy theorists, which I had already made a video on as mentioned before. Link down below. As much as I enjoy a good conspiracy theory because I find many of them to be quite fascinating and entertaining, I do also try to look for a more logical and rational explanation for many of these things, rather than simply putting on my tinfoil hat from the get-go. But like any open-minded person, I also don't simply throw out the baby with the bathwater and become an uber skeptic either, since one can simply do a bit of research to find that some conspiracy theories have been proven to be right on many occasions in the past. Just look at the Jeffrey Epstein case, or something like MKUltra, or that time when Edward Snowden leaked those documents that prove that the government is indeed spying on you. All topics which I plan to do videos on in the future. So with regards to the research facility at Plum Island, of course my first instinct was to simply dismiss the whole secret government lab for bioweapons experiments idea and take it at face value, that it is nothing more than a virology and disease research center that specifically focuses on animal-related illnesses. But then, when I started researching this topic, I started to come across some very peculiar happenings that have been taking place either in or around Plum Island that are in some way connected to the research facility on the island itself. This new train of thought regarding Plum Island was also greatly influenced by an episode that AJ and Hecklefish of the Y-Files did on the topic as well, which I will also link to in the description below, because the Y-Files is just such an awesome YouTube channel. The first glaring example that something weird is definitely going on at Plum Island is the fact that it is run by and under the administration of the US Department of Homeland Security, which itself was established in the year 2003 in response to the 9/11 attacks in the year 2001, in order to deal with domestic issues involving anti-terrorism and more specifically domestic terrorism, civil defense, immigration and customs, border control, cybersecurity, transportation security, maritime security and sea rescue, and the mitigation of weapons of mass destruction. Due to this connection with what is essentially a counter-terrorism organization with strong ties to the US military, one cannot help but wonder, why on earth are they in charge of a research facility that is supposed to only be studying and finding ways to combat animal-related diseases? More specifically, diseases that affect farm animals like cows.
Say, hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right.
Then, the second glaring example that something is definitely not right with this place is the fact that the scientists working at the facility on Plum Island are under constant guard by armed officers and are transported to the island by way of special government ferries. Then there's the fact that journalists from CBS News who attempted to run a story on the Plum Island Animal Disease Center back in 2012 were told that they were not allowed to film or take pictures, as well as being told that the various diseases and pathogens being studied at the facility are all classified information, with the only one we definitely know about for sure being foot and mouth disease in cows. The reason for all this tight security and secrecy, at least according to the island's PR team and the scientists that work there, is that after the September 11 terrorist attacks in 2001 on the Twin Towers in New York, increasing paranoia and fears within the United States government, intelligence community and military created the desire for facilities like the Plum Island Animal Disease Center to be under extreme constant surveillance and security, with all information regarding any diseases being researched at the site to be buried under various levels of classification. For fear of a potential terrorist attack on the research labs located there and any attempts by terrorists at using the research done in those labs to create bioweapons for germ warfare. And this paranoia would actually be proven correct in the year 2008 when a former MIT graduate and suspected Al-Qaeda member by the name of Afia Siddiqui was captured in Afghanistan. One of the locations on a list in her possession that featured a series of planned terrorist attacks was in fact Plum Island, at least according to the US Department of Justice and US intelligence agencies. But many a would-be conspiracy theorist isn't so easily convinced, and rightly so, since Plum Island was indeed proven to be a haven for scientific experiments involving biological and germ warfare dating all the way back to the 1950s, despite the fact that these claims are denied to this day, even in the face of hard evidence proving the claims to be true. It turns out that since 1954, in a specific building within the Plum Island Animal Disease Center complex called Lab 257, there had indeed been experiments and research being conducted into biological warfare and attempts at creating bioweapons to be used in times of war against an enemy. More specifically, bioweapons that would target enemy livestock. However, this secret bioweapons program was allegedly ended by the US President Richard Nixon in 1969, and all information related to it was covered up with knowledge about the research being denied right up until the year 1993, when an American newspaper managed to unearth documents proving that such research had indeed been conducted at the Plum Island Animal Disease Center. As to whether or not such research continues in the present day, well, that is a very good question now, isn't it?
Plum Island is Illuminati confirmed.
But now this leads us into the more crazier but also interesting claims surrounding Plum Island and its science facility. Outside of the probably very true claims of research into bioweapons and germ warfare going on at the Plum Island labs, there have also been claims of experiments regarding animal hybrids and genetic manipulation, which may also involve human experimentation as well. Claims of them creating half-human, half-animal chimeras and the like, and while I may lean towards more of a skeptical opinion regarding these claims, they do seem to be backed up by a small grain of highly embellished truth. Take for instance the so-called Montauk Monster that was spotted on a beach near the business district of Montauk, New York, the same area where the so-called Montauk project took place. Remember to check out that video if you haven't already. Essentially, the half-decomposed body of an extremely weird-looking creature washed up on the shores of a nearby beach and was spotted by a handful of people who were in the immediate vicinity at the time. A few photos were taken, and since the decomposed state of the body made it difficult to identify exactly what type of animal it may have been, it led to some wild speculations, which in turn snowballed into some pretty bizarre conspiracy theories that even found their way into local newspapers and even a dedicated episode on ancient aliens.
If today we're able to create a two-headed dog with 6 legs, is it possible that a similar creature existed thousands of years ago? And I say yes.
At first glance, the mysterious carcass does indeed look very strange. It has very little fur, smooth, rubbery-like skin, a beak, and a face that looks almost dog-like, and extremely long limbs. It turns out later, however, that paleozoologists studying images of the carcass viewed from a more detailed angle were able to determine that it was nothing more than a decomposing raccoon that most likely drowned in the ocean based on the corpse's visible dentition or teeth, skull shape and front paws, with its extremely odd appearance merely being a byproduct of decomposition and water action, removing most of the animal's hair and some of its flesh, which could also explain its bloated appearance and rubbery skin texture as well. Though they did acknowledge that its front legs did seem to be longer than your average raccoon, so who knows, maybe they really were creating mutant raccoons on Plum Island after all. Then there is the case of an extremely strange looking human corpse with elongated fingers and limbs washing up on the shores of Plum Island itself, right near where the disease research labs are located back in 2010. According to police reports, the body, which was fully clothed, was found by a security guard that worked at the labs on the island's southwest beach, where access is restricted to outsiders. Autopsy reports revealed that the partially decomposed body was that of a black adult male about 6 feet tall with a large build and very long fingers, and that there were no obvious signs of trauma and no immediate cause of death. However, some articles on the story have noted the presence of brain surgery scars on the man's head, and try as I might have while researching for this video, I simply could not find any other information regarding this bizarre event, nor the actual identity of this mysterious, long-fingered, 6-foot-tall dead man. If any of you have any more info on this specific incident, please do share in the comments down below. This also would not be the only case of human remains washing up onto the shores of either Plum Island or any of the surrounding beaches like that of Long Island or Montauk. In 2014, there was another story reported in the Boston Globe of a man and his dog coming across a severed human leg, still wearing a sock, while going out for a simple stroll along Plum Island Beach, together with reports of at least several other findings of human remains in the month of December of that same year. Another article in the Boston Globe in the following year of 2015 talks of yet another body, this time of a woman, also found on Plum Island. So one has to ask the question, what the f is up with all these strange cases of human remains being found so often in and around Plum Island, especially near the vicinity of the research labs? Not a good look, US Department of Homeland Security. But dead bodies and human-animal hybrids aside, there is one more conspiracy theory linked to the Plum Island labs, which, just like their research into bioweapons and germ warfare, may actually be based on some truth. See, in the upper Midwest and the northeastern parts of the United States, there does seem to be quite the severe issue of Lyme disease, an illness which is caused by Borrelia bacteria that is spread via tick bites. Now, going back as far as the late 20th century, there have been rumors and conspiracies that claim that Lyme disease was actually bioengineered at the Plum Island Animal Disease Center, and that through either an accidental lab leak or maybe even on purpose, the ticks carrying the disease ended up spreading to the surrounding areas. At least all of this is according to the claims made in a book about the subject written by an American lawyer named Michael Christopher Carroll. The book in question being published in 2004 entitled Lab 257, The Disturbing Story of the Government's Secret Plum Island Germ Laboratory. The counter-evidence to this, though, is that both the bacteria which causes Lyme disease, specifically called Borrelia burgdorferi, and the species of ticks that carry it did in fact exist in the northeastern and midwestern regions of the United States long before any research facility even appeared on Plum Island, with some evidence even pointing to its existence long before European colonization even took place in North America. But then again, many conspiracy theorists are not so easily convinced, and I can definitely understand why, since the Plum Island Animal Disease Center did in fact experience multiple outbreaks in the past, even going as far back as the year 1978, wherein foot and mouth disease ended up spreading outside the center and infecting animals in the surrounding areas, and yet another case of the same outbreak back in 2004, this time at least mostly being contained to the animals that were being kept on the facility grounds and the labs itself. Still though, with such outbreaks happening, it isn't hard to understand why so many people may believe that a man-made strain of Lyme disease may have originated from the Animal Disease Center located on the island, despite the fact that this is strongly denied by both researchers working at the center and the US Department of Homeland Security, which, as mentioned earlier, is in charge of the facility. Yeah, right.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my god.
It also doesn't help the fact that Plum Island and the research being done there have ties to former Nazi operatives as well. Erich Traub was a German veterinarian scientist and virologist who was a staunch member of the Nationalist Socialist Motor Corps, a military transportation unit of the Nazi army, until he eventually began working directly under Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS or Nazi secret police, after which he would be placed in charge of a bioweapons research facility on Reims Island. After the war, he managed to escape Soviet-controlled East Germany via the help of British and American intelligence agents and shipped off to the United States as part of Operation Paperclip, along with a handful of other German scientists as well. A few months into his Operation Paperclip contract, Traub was asked to meet with US scientists from Fort Detrick, the Army's biological warfare headquarters in Frederick, Maryland state. As a noted German authority on viruses, he was asked to consult on the animal disease program from a biological warfare perspective. Traub discussed the work done at the Reich Research Institute for Virus Diseases of Animals on Reims Island during World War II for the Nazis. Traub gave a very detailed explanation of the secret operation at the institute and his activities there. This information provided the groundwork for Fort Detrick's offshore germ warfare animal disease lab on Plum Island. Lastly, there's also the fact that Plum Island has been nicknamed Anthrax Island, since one of the many diseases that are researched there also turns out to be anthrax, with many conspiracy theorists also connecting it to the development of bioweapons like the so-called anthrax bombs and the 2001 anthrax attacks which took place straight after 9/11, wherein a handful of civilians Mostly people working at various media outlets across the United States became infected with the deadly disease via coming in contact with anthrax-laced letters, in what has since become thought of as a bioterrorist attack, with the goal of spreading the disease throughout the general American public. About 5 people died as a result, and a further 17 were infected but were able to receive treatment. So in conclusion, while I personally do not believe that there are animal-human hybrids being genetically engineered or grown in large vats at the Plum Island Animal Disease Center because, come on, really? There is plenty of evidence that proves that Plum Island does indeed have quite a shady history, especially with its involvement in germ warfare and bioweapons research as far back as the 1950s. As to whether a man-made strain of Lyme disease originated on the island, I'm not too sure. However, if it did, I wouldn't be surprised at all, given all the other wild shit they do in those labs and the number of outbreaks they've had there.
I say we take off and nuke the entire site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Fucking A.
Anyway, that brings us to the end of this week's episode of the 8-Bit Academic. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to give us a like, leave a comment, and share it with... you already know the drill by now, I'm sure. Because literally every single YouTuber says it because of how cuck the algorithm is. For those of you who don't know what cuck means, it's basically just a South African slang term for the word shit. But anyway, thank you for the continued support in helping this humble channel grow. And as always, peace be upon you, and I'll see you all next time. Salagahle.